Thank you, Baraka. That was terrific. Thank you. On behalf of Greater New York, the 40 corporate executives and 40 nonprofit executive directors who have participated in the program, and the Mayor's Office, which housed this program since its inception in 2009 until this spring, I thank you, Outward Bound Schools, Stu Bohart, and Richard Stopel, for making Greater New York making it possible for New York to be greater and for this honor. I extend my thanks to Alice Naude, Greater New York's talented executive director, and to Jamie Rubin, who is here tonight, my co-founder and dear friend who has exemplified Greater New York's interest in the crossroads of nonprofit business and government by moving from the private equity world to a new government role recently announced as New York State's Housing Commissioner. As you can tell from the two students who spoke, Outward Bound Schools and Greater New York share a belief in the importance of the art of conversation. I would go further to say that a meaningful civic life begins with conversations. But when is the last time a student, or even an adult in a business setting, received sincere praise for being a great conversationalist? Greater New York is about conversation. This is an old-fashioned idea whose time has come around again. In this moment of political discourse that is about shouting, interpersonal communication that is about tapping on a keyboard, and a world in which more people wear headphones than say hello on the street, the art of conversation, of listening and responding in a safe and productive way, could be the most effective and cheapest way to bring about progress in our city. It starts with knowing how to listen. Through Greater New York, a senior corporate executive or senior lawyer is matched with the head of a nonprofit essential to New York City, and they embark on 2 years of monthly conversations. They meet to talk for 1 or 2 hours or so a month, sometimes a few times in between, over 24 months. The partners decide on tangible goals for their work, restructuring, growth, building a talent pipeline, issues that executives in any sector need to talk through confidentially. Most partnerships exceed their goals because the conversation with a peer who brings a new perspective is stimulating, intense, strategic, and benefits both sides of the partnership as well as the wider community for which the nonprofit's work is critical. When we match a nonprofit executive to a corporate executive, we always have a conversation with the executive director, and we ask, what are the attributes you value in your best friend, your spouse, your partner? What type of person do you want to talk about work with outside of the office? And we've heard some very interesting responses, most particularly about spouses and partners. But one director of a domestic violence program said she was looking for a clown since her work was very heavy and she needed an opportunity to release some of that with levity. I recently found my notes for my interview with Richard Stopel in 2009, and here's what he said he was looking for above all else. Quote unquote, someone who listens well and asks good questions. He mentioned the niceness quotient, a straight shooter, a mensch. It was one of the easiest and best matches we could make, since Stu Bohart, like Richard, is all of these. Stu Bohart, our very successful business person, knows how to listen. He listened to Richard Stopel when he first came out to Long Island City to meet Richard in what we at Greater New York called a chaperoned blind date. He then suggested another act of generosity. He proposed meeting with each of Richard's trustees to have conversations about their board roles and offered to be the translator back to Richard to see if there was a gap in expectation. You can all imagine how useful those conversations were and continue to be for Outward Bound Schools. It was such a simple, smart, low-cost, minimal-time intervention that we now recommend to every Greater New York corporate partner that they take the Stu Bohart listening tour. We need more New Yorkers like you, Stu, willing to engage in meaningful conversations to build upon nonprofit leadership in New York. I was shocked to read a statistic in one of Richard Stopel's excellent essays about the centrality of dialogue in the OBS education. A recent study showed that, on average, American high schoolers have a conversation with an adult just once in every 48 hours. The Crew Advisor system at Outward Bound Schools functions gloriously to provide that trusted and safe adult advice and conversation for the students several times a day. Some of my own favorite conversation partners are Outward Bound School crew members. They also happen to be among the most successful and most generous people in New York. One is Carl Weisbrod, an early advisor to Greater New York and former board chair of Outward Bound Schools. Thank you, Carl, for teaching so many of us the importance of being a good listener and a good problem solver. I feel lucky to have you. I think we should clap for Carl. I feel lucky to have you on the Greater New York crew, and New York is lucky to have you running the ship of city planning now. Another gifted communicator is my friend Gifford Miller, the chair of Outward Bound Schools currently, who understands the value of conversation, whether as the Speaker of the City Council, a developer of affordable housing, or as a civic leader. So what does all of this mean for us here? I know that you care about education of young people since you are here supporting Outward Bound Schools tonight. It is time for us to teach the art of conversation. If the young adults in your life are anything like those in mine, they are often more comfortable texting and reading than listening and speaking. Constantly accessible headphones deter and defer conversations. Would we have a Greater New York if, while school is out this summer, we each took a young person to lunch? What if we shared a hot dog in the park or found a coffee shop and spent an hour engaged in conversation with a young person? Richard Stopel talks about students stepping out of their comfort zones as a precondition for success. Let's all agree to step outside our comfortable weekday pattern and take a young person, preferably one we're not related to, out for lunch and a conversation. If Greater New York and Outward Bound Schools experiences are any indication, we will not only hear, but learn and teach, and perhaps even rediscover something special about ourselves. Thank you for listening to me tonight. I look forward to hearing from you about your Take a Young Person to Lunch experience this summer. Perhaps we can have a conversation about how together we can work for a Greater New York, for all New Yorkers, but most especially for Outward Bound students and their families. Thank you.